Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome back to 3 News Now. I'm Stephanie Haney. Today, as always, we have your top headlines, trending topics, and what we're working on for you right now ahead of our TV shows at 6, 7, and 11 p.m. tonight. It is Wednesday, December 11th, 2019. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the big announcement from Cedar Point today about what we can expect in its 150th season coming up in just a couple of months, actually in 150 days. We will also be taking a look back at the big picture of the top Google searches for the greater Cleveland area from 2019. And then we're going to talk with senior reporter Drew Horansky about the Amy Should Be 40 podcast. Today would have been Amy Mihaljevic's birthday. She disappeared 30 years ago and was found murdered. We'll be talking about episodes 4 and 5 in that 5-part series with him in just a couple minutes. And also remind you that today those lawn passes for Blossom Music Center go on sale. So we'll let you know how you can get your hands on some of those. It's a pretty good deal. All right, we're going to dive into the Cedar Point announcement today, and we're going to start with what I think is probably the coolest thing. They are offering a lifetime ticket to a select number of customers because it's the 150th season coming up this spring. They'll be giving away 150 free lifetime tickets throughout the season. The winners will be given lifetime admission to Cedar Point and Cedar Point Shores with free parking. And as another bonus, those people will be given 3 more lifetime tickets so they don't have to go alone. They can bring friends and family with them. And you can win while visiting Cedar Point, but there will also be chances to win online, and we'll get more details about that at a later date. Some of the other highlights from the announcement that came this morning at 11 a.m. include a new boat ride, renovated restaurants, changes to the live entertainment scene at Cedar Point, and plenty of new merchandise and some things that are old being made new again. Here's something that you might remember. I definitely remember these from when I was little. The vintage fruit-shaped juice containers. CP Juice Company will be bringing back the fruit-shaped containers. There will be grape, apple, lemon, and orange, and in them you can get fresh juice, smoothies, and slushies. Those will be at a stand next to the Scrambler. When it comes to live entertainment, Cedar Point will be celebrating its 150th spectacular with a, quote, massive interactive midway experience. Now, this is going to be a parade that travels through the park, and what I think is particularly cool about this is that people who are at the park are actually invited to join the parade as it winds through the park. So that's going to kick off starting June 12th. When it comes to the merchandise that will be available at Cedar Point, there will be commemorative 150th anniversary merchandise, lots of it, including a 150th coin. There'll be only 500 of those. The Pagoda gift shop is also being remodeled and will be called the Celebration Central. So all of the 150th anniversary merchandise will be available there. And of course, we all love free things, right? So you'll be able to get free buttons at Cedar Point. This is kind of like those pins that they give out at Disney theme parks. Those will also be at the Pagoda gift shop. And you will also be able to get free postcards. There'll be 3 different designs. Those will be available at the Celebration Central gift shop, and you can mail them right from the store. And vintage apparel to celebrate all the 150 seasons of Cedar Point. Okay, now taking a look at what's trending on a larger scale than we usually do. We're going to look at what's been trending throughout the greater Cleveland area for the entire year of 2019. Google releases this information every year, and it's the people, topics, events, and places that have captured the world's attention. In Cleveland, for the most part, for the top 10, it was sports, movies, and money. The number 1 search in the greater Cleveland area on Google was IRS.gov refund. People wanted their money. Number 2 was Nipsey Hussle. Now, if you remember, he is the rapper and community philanthropist who was shot to death in March. The entire country mourned his passing. That was a very big deal. That was the number 2 search here in Cleveland. Number 3 is Cameron Boyce. Cameron Boyce also left us unexpectedly in July. He was a Disney star who died of a seizure because he had epilepsy. So his passing landed number 3. Number 4, Antonio Brown. This is where we start to bring in a little bit of the controversy here. So he was playing for the Raiders, and he was cut after he posted an Instagram post asking to be released and ended up voiding nearly $30 million in guaranteed money from that contract. So then he got picked up by the New England Patriots, but he was cut just 11 days later. So in that time between being released from the Raiders and picked up by the Patriots, there was a lawsuit filed by Brown's former trainer, Brittany Taylor, accusing him of sexual assault and rape. But that wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back for Brown with the Patriots. Then a separate person came forward and told Sports Illustrated that Brown made an unwanted sexual advance against her and then produced text messages that were said to be texted by Brown, which were threatening and intimidating, and that's when he was cut from the Patriots. Now, Brown, of course, has maintained that he has done nothing wrong throughout this entire ordeal, but he still remains unsigned. Number 4 top search in Cleveland is Captain Marvel, who finally got her own movie. Captain Marvel is played by Brie Larson. That movie came out in March and was a very big deal. Top number 4 search here in Cleveland. Number 5, Disney Plus. That was the streaming service. Excuse me, number 6 was Disney Plus, the streaming service. That launched this year. And then we had number 7, Game of Thrones, which had its final season this year on HBO, followed by number 7, Avengers Endgame. Now, parts of that were shot here in Cleveland by the Russo brothers. They are now here shooting the movie Cherry. Number 9, I have my numbers a little bit off, sorry about that. Number 9, Myles Garrett. We can thank the incident that happened between Myles Garrett and Steelers quarterback Mason Rudolph for him landing at the number 9 spot on the Google search in 2019. That's where he hit Mason Rudolph in the head with his helmet after the Browns beat the Steelers here at home at First Energy Stadium. That's number 9 on the list. And then number 10, Lori Loughlin, which of course is thanks to her alleged involvement in the college bribery scandal, which has gripped the country as we continue to see what will happen there with Lori Loughlin and other famous people, including Felicity Huffman, who recently finished her jail sentence related to her involvement in that. All right, now we're going to be bringing in senior reporter Drew Horansky, and we'll be talking about the Amy Should Be 40 podcast. The Amy Should Be 40 podcast is a 5-part series about the murder and disappearance of Amy Mihaljevic, and today would have been Amy's birthday. Drew,
Crazy
thanks
to think
for joining
about
us.
that, isn't it?
Absolutely
well,
wild.
I'm so close in age to Amy that to think about that, it brings it home, because you think about, where would she be today? Would she be a mother? Would she have children? Where would she be living? Of course, so many milestones this year, the 30th anniversary of her disappearance and ultimate death, but then today talking about that on her birthday.
And as you put together this 5-part series, we're going to be talking about the last 2 episodes today, episode 4 and episode 5. In episode 4, you really dived into how her family was coping with that loss.
How they deal with their grief. I think a lot of people would ask themselves the same thing. How do you deal in a situation like that? We had a great opportunity to talk to her brother Jason. We revisit again with her father Mark, and really what this did to him. And Jason and Amy were only 2 years apart. They always met after school when they both came home. That day, they were dismissed at different times. She had come home a little bit earlier, and then he came home and didn't see her, reported it to his mother. And of course, we know the rest of the story as to what happened. She was ultimately abducted. But after that time, Jason talks to us about what it was like living in that house with his parents, sort of dealing with that tension, that uncertainty, and he tries to basically disappear and make himself somewhat, takes himself out of the picture. And I think even to this day, to a certain degree, he continues to do that. He doesn't watch a lot of media. He doesn't necessarily grant a lot of interviews. And for him, I think he's just hoping that there are answers here. But it really is an interesting look into the psychology and the impact of something like this on a family.
Sure. Drew, do you have siblings?
No, I'm an only child.
I have 2 siblings. I have an older and a younger brother, and I just thinking about what it would be like for them all of a sudden to be absent, that just completely changes the dynamic when you're used to being a 2-some or a 3-some at family events and functions.
He said they were close, and there's not the what if of what the relationship would be like. He was close to her. They loved each other. They had a strong relationship. He now is a father himself. He thinks about her birthday, as many of us do when it comes to December 11th. But just that, what would her life have been like? How do you go on without knowing what completely happened?
Sure. And we talk about the importance of keeping this story alive. You actually had an opportunity to talk with Tom Barris, who reported on this when you were just a kid.
Right. I remember that. No, and it was interesting when Tom Barris was here, and we both worked together side by side in the newsroom. I always had a little bit of starstruck. There's Tom Barris, and we bring him back into the telling of this story for episode 5. Tom remembering what it was like as the lead reporter of the story, and we talk a little bit about how there's sort of a torch that goes on where it was his story, and now I've grown up and it's kind of become my story. I've done a few pieces in addition to this podcast on the Amy Mihaljevic story, and he really shares some interesting perspective on this. In particular, an incident that happened at St. Angela's Parish where a person had confessed to being Amy Mihaljevic's killer, and he was there in church that day, and he tells us that story. So it just adds a really interesting element of color to it, because as we, to this day, still don't know who did it. Let's not forget that there are people who came forward and actually confessed to this, and Tom talks about that. So that's what we get into a little bit with episode 5. And again, in both episodes, we talk about technology and how there are changes today that could possibly bring us closer than ever to finding a killer. And we talk about some of the different things that have been done over the years, which are really interesting. Things like hypnotizing children who were there, using truth serum on suspects. These are, I think, two of the most important episodes, because it really shows how intense investigators have been to trying to find answers. And we talked to the current FBI, of course, lead on this case in episode 5 to see where she thinks things stand.
And this case, very much ongoing. They've gotten 3 tips a week on average every week for the past 30 years?
Up to 3 tips a week, yes.
Wow.
Sometimes more, sometimes less. That's somewhat of an average, but you can imagine doing the math, and I'm not a numbers person.
It's a lot.
But they have so many. And as we've talked to James Renner throughout all of this, he doesn't think in terms of, a top handful of suspects. I mean, there are as many as 24 or more viable people who they just haven't had enough to lead to charges, and really haven't quite had totally enough to completely rule them out. So when we think about the list of suspects in this case, it really is a long one. And I believe we can solve this. I believe it could be solved, and it will be surprising, I think, when we finally have those answers.
Well, and the FBI agrees with you, because as we've talked about with previous episodes, they've said that they feel like they're closer than ever to solving the case, right?
They could be, yes. And of course, they don't want to show their cards, but there are some technological breakthroughs which we talk about. And I think it's just keeping the story alive in situations like this. And we revisit with Mark Mihaljevic in this too. How have you not given up hope? How, after all this time, going to sleep all those nights since the last time you kissed your daughter goodnight, how do you continue to go on? And he answers that question, which is towards the end of our podcast.
So Amy disappeared from Bay Village. She was found in Ashland County.
Correct.
And they are still memorializing the scene of her discovery there?
Not with anything like what you have in the middle of Bay Village, where they actually have a donated monument, but it was very interesting on the fall day that we went there, because in the spot, people have left flowers. And it was just, to me, so touching. And you see it along the sides of roads where car accidents have happened, but this is just a random spot in a field, and it illustrated and underscored how people still care and still go back, and to this day pause. As we've been saying throughout, and the reason we are continuing to do this, it has just gripped the community so much that even now people go back to that spot.
Right, even after 30 years, even today, what would have been her birthday.
And on this night, 30 years ago, was the night that all the church bells in Bay Village rang in unison. They planted a tree in Amy's honor near her school. So it's just interesting to think back, and you hear some of that sound in our podcast from the original coverage of the time, to think of it was a cold night, there was a light dusting of snow on the ground, and on this day, 30 years ago, there was still hope that she could be found alive, and the community, this would have been the lead story on all of the newscasts that night.
Wow. That's wild to think about. So this is available, this 5-part series is available everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher, and Google Play. Very much primarily a listening experience as it is a podcast, but on the website we do have photos and other interactive things.
Very interactive, yes. You can see, pictures from the time. One of the things that I think people may want to consider taking a look at, and we talked about this in earlier episodes, are the curtains and the blankets that were found with her in that field in Ashland County. Something that investigators still want the public to take a look at, because they believe that Amy's body had come in contact with them, and if someone recognizes them, could possibly help investigators pinpoint maybe who that suspect was, or how they would have come in contact with Amy.
There you go. You could take a look. You might be the person who helps bring the person who murdered Amy Mihaljevic to justice. Okay. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And before we let you go, we're going to share some good news with you. The Blossom Music Center Lawn Pass is available now for $199. You can get that pass that is good for every summer concert this season at Blossom Music Center. It's a Live Nation pass. It's $199, and it is also good for all sold-out shows at Blossom. So the general sale for the lawn pass started this afternoon at 1 p.m., and it will only be available until Tuesday, December 31st, or while supplies last. It's highly likely that it might sell out before that because it is a pretty good deal. $199, and again, some of those performers coming to Blossom Music Center this summer include Maroon 5 with Meghan Trainor, Alanis Morissette, Journey, and the Doobie Brothers, among many others. So if you're a music fan, you definitely want to check that out. All right, thank you very much for joining us here on 3 News Now today. We appreciate you joining us here on Facebook and YouTube, as well as WKYC.com and on our 3 News app. If you don't already, make sure you like our Facebook page, and also please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/WKYC-TV. While you're there, you can click the bell on any of our videos to make sure that you get a notification every single time we go live so that you can be a part of this conversation. Let's keep this conversation going. You can always message me directly on Twitter and Instagram at _Stephanie Haney. I'm Stephanie Haney. This has been 3 News Now, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great night.